K through 12 is ample time to learn, in my opinion, what it is you need to know about the African worldview. And I say that because K through 12 is currently ample time for African descendants to abandon the African worldview. Let's start with K through 12. 13 years of honest, Alkebu-Lan focused discussions, Alkebu-Lan driven, Alkebu-Lan narrative information.
Yeah, it was just at birth, everybody should just get a Cliff Notes version of, I don't know, 1995 all the way back to Kemet.
Along with the birth certificate, just slap a handbook in the parents' hands and say, make sure they know this by
12th grade.
But does it get edited, and how often does it get edited?
The other problem is, what do we do with the adults that don't even have that?
I mean, if we're handing out handbooks, right? These babies don't know how to read. So aren't we indirectly educating the parents as well?
We are. It's just like disguised handbooks, except we're all like Alkebu-Lan did a handbook.
Dual purpose. Yeah, just killing two birds with one stone. Because you're absolutely right that the parents have to be informed. Otherwise, they're going to misdirect the children, as I believe that our parents' generation weren't very good guidance in terms of how to navigate this political landmine that we're in.
I think that would be a great idea. There's precedent for this, right? Because remember, they had the book that had the hotels and places that black folks could stay across the country.
The Green Book.
And then pretty much every black house used to have that one clock that had, on one part was Martin Luther King, and the other part was John F. Kennedy. Mm-hmm. Maybe more in the South, but there's always something in the house that had Martin Luther King on it and John F. Kennedy on it.
You being from the South, was Juneteenth something that was of importance in growing up?
Florida is a little bit different. I mean, it's the South, but not really. I don't know about Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi and those places, but Juneteenth wasn't really anything.
I'm going to say this because I've seen a textbook as recently as about 4 years ago. They're starting to correct some of the information to be more honest with themselves. And when I say they, I'm speaking about Board of Educations, particularly here in Dade County. I read a Miami-Dade County approved high school textbook. And when I was reading it, I was like, this is pretty accurate.
This is perhaps that particular publisher, but we're talking about the same time frame that Texas released textbooks that said that we were migrant workers.
Absolutely. Texas probably released those textbooks in response to the fact, again, that we were getting closer to the true history. So this goes back to my point at the beginning of the conversation. As we begin to shift the conversation back to more accurate history, more history that reflects the truth about what happened to African people, then there is either mass effort to shift the conversation or violence perpetuated against us to scare us off of the position of that conversation.
In terms of conversation, and this is something that you informed me of, in looking back into history, are we taking the position of position A or position B in this conversation that we're having with the world? Are we taking the A side of the conversation where we are asserting our position, or are we taking the B side where we are just providing a response to a situation that we're placed in?
Anytime somebody changes my paradigm, I want to give them the credit for doing that. Speaking of it from the A side and the B side, this is something that I learned recently, I would say as recently as 5 or 6 years ago, from Sonetta TV. So I know I've said his name about 3 or 4 times in this conversation. I don't know how many of them are going to make the edits, but that's fine. 1. That's fine. I was watching an episode of Sonetta TV, and that's still 1. You can't. I can't stop. Why is it so important for me to keep plugging them? Because he collected the archive of videos of all of our great historic teachers. A lot of the names of these people I would not have even known if it wasn't for that channel on YouTube. Mm-hmm. So literally, he would be the person in the back recording their conferences, and he would travel oftentimes at his own expense just to get the recording so that he could archive that we have scholars that are lighting the scene on fire with information. And then he would capture a video recording of them while all this stuff was VHS. And then finally, when YouTube hit, he said, well, I have an archive with thousands, if not tens of thousands of hours of footage from lectures and meetings and conferences with these people. And I can upload all those things to YouTube. So it was like bringing our teachers back into our living room. Now we didn't have to get on an airplane and go to California where there was a conference, or go to DC.
No, some of these people that you've come into understanding existed had already transitioned. So.
Correct. Even that. But the ones who are alive, you still didn't even have to travel, because he was doing current stuff as well as uploading the historic archives. Of course, there was a community that he is a part of, and part of that community I got to find out was the Amun-Ra squad. And on that squad is a person named Ankh, the God Killer. So, of course, I will always give Sa Neter again. I will always give the Amun-Ra squad plugs, because they helped me to get to where I am today in my understanding of the importance of having or being well rooted in history. And one of the things that I learned from Ankh, the God Killer, is that there are two positions that you can take in a conversation: the A side and the B side. And what ended up happening was the people that enslaved us got so used to taking the A side of the conversation that we forgot that there was an A side and a B side of the conversation. So we just automatically assumed that Europe had all the knowledge, Europe had all the right answers, Europe won all the debates, Europe settled all the arguments, Europe has all of the technological research necessary to answer the questions that the rest of the people don't have. So we're going to give them the lead role in educating the planet. We're going to acquiesce to them that they were the ones that enlightened the world. Therefore, if we come across some knowledge in our lowly state and we bring it to some European and they disagree with it, we are going to let go of our position. And we're going to say, well, what do we know? We must have made an error, i.e. being the B side of the conversation. What our scholars have taught us is that we have enough information and we have done enough research to understand that there's been enough misinformation put out by Europe that we can begin to reclaim our side of the conversation as the A side of the conversation, particularly when dealing with discussions about history, culture, spirituality.
But is it a conversation that even needs to be had? Because in going back into the past, all we're doing is taking on the task of sleuthing through the lies that have been told to us by Europeans, trying to uncover it. Why not just say it's all a lie? We know it. From here, we're moving forward, and we're moving forward on our own consciousness. We're moving forward on what we believe and not worried about what you have to say.
Good. I love that. And we have enough scholars that are of African descent that are even on the continent. You can turn to scholarship of Sheikh Anta Diop. You can turn to the scholarship of Kwame Nkrumah. You can turn to the scholarship of Theophile Obenga. That's just 3 people from the continent. We don't need European scholarship anymore. We don't need to drudge through European scholarship anymore. But they keep dragging us back and
to make themselves
reinforcing
relevant.
Themselves as the so-called A side of the conversation.
Right. Like, oh, well, if we don't put our stamp on it, if our scholars don't confirm your belief, then you know what? It's still up for debate.
Correct. And then we acquiesce to them as being the A side of the conversation, and then go to their universities and try to write dissertations in Oxford,
trying to get them to change their position.
And then we
that will hopefully change our people's position, because all over social media, and we say to each other, well, you know what? If you want somebody of African descent to believe what you're saying or to change their ways, you have to send a white messenger.
That's something that we've taught ourselves when we gave up the A side of the conversation.
I think we can spend our time more wisely on future-oriented. What are we going to do now?
Right. While not Europeans alone, but China, what have you, they are into space exploration. They're destroying the planet. They have a plan B. Based on what Jermaine is saying, you know, we already have the understanding that these people have done all that they could to destroy this planet. So they're off to plan B, and they're into space exploration, and they're leaving this, right? So why are we worried about looking in the past when we already have an understanding that they were the contributors to our demise? I don't think that there's anyone that's living today that's Well, let me walk that back because we have a lot of people that want to say that it's our own doing. But we, generally speaking, know that other peoples played a hand at our demise, the destruction of our civilizations.
And before you answer that, Shabbat hopefully you're not going to go down this direction. Well, we're not trying to be like them. Our gauge for our humanity is not how Europeans gauge their humanity, right? That's what you teach. Like, we're not comparing ourselves to them. We have our own set of our own worldview.
And it's a higher standard.
However, be that as it may, there's still certain things that we must do and we must know and we must acquire knowledge in order to participate in humanity and put ourselves in a position that even though the world is being destroyed around us, that we'll be able to come up with the upper hand.
Right, because otherwise then we're going to be that parent or grandparent that has to go to another race and say, well, help me to deal with this internet thingy or this, living off of the planet in some satellite planet.
History is going to be our compass for what we need to be in the future. Therefore, we have to go back and look at the needs that our people have historically so that we can plan to correct the issues that we're having. If we have no historical reference, then we have nothing to correct.
Well, that history department better be robust.
Right. So then what we're going to do is we're going to append ourselves on to other people's missions for what they want to accomplish for their people. So you spoke of space exploration. But before we abandon this planet, and just to make it quite clear, we're not as far ahead in getting to outer space as we think we are.
Well, we may not be, but those that are leaving the planet on a regular basis are not us.
Let's think about that for a moment, because we would think that there's a whole bunch of people leaving the planet, and there isn't.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying they're leaving in droves.
Let me tell you.
They're sending out, and they're asking to colonize.
There are only
Europeans,
three
America,
countries.
Russia, and China. Right?
There are only 3 countries that have ever put human beings into space. And if you want to be into space from another country that's not America, Russia, or China, then you have to buy a ticket on their spaceship.
I think space is an example. There are other aspects.
Space is an example, but again, if we don't know the history of manned missions to space, then we can get all loose as to how far people are ahead in this space race. And America and Russia were neck and neck because, as we know from the history, they divided the rocket scientists, literally rocket scientists that were in Germany, and they separated the East German rocket scientists from the West German rocket scientists.
I just want to make it clear there were Nazis that worked for us, Nazis that headed the NASA.
So the reason that East Germany was separated from West Germany is because there was a war, World War II. Nazi scientists in Germany were separated by the Allied powers. When Russia and America broke off, the Nazi scientists got cut in half. Half of them went to Russia, half of them went to the United States. Those 2 sets of scientists then got working on the rockets that would propel people to space. The Russians won and sent the first manned mission to space. America was right behind them because they've been stealing secrets from each other ever since that occurred, right? And so then America was next. China didn't get up into space until 2000 something. This is a full 40 years after America and Russia had been going to space for decades, bringing all other countries with them into space, including Cuba. Cuba has been to space several times, and China still wasn't there because China didn't want to hitch a ride with anybody. China said, we want to go on our own spaceship. So what China ended up doing was doing a trade deal with Russia to give Russia raw material or something. And then Russia gave them the missing components of their information that they needed to make a manned trip to space. So if we don't know that history, we would think that the rest of the world is so far ahead of Africa.
That's fine that's the history of how those nations manned space and were able to send satellites into space and explore what have you. What I'm saying is, just as you use the analogy, how we have to stay relevant, technology is a big issue for us. And you started talking about parents and grandparents that have been left behind in the technology age, and they're unable to cope and deal with the everyday activities that require technology. We're going to find ourselves as a people having to turn to other people people that already have a history of doing us harm trying to keep up because we're not even in the race, because we're so caught up in trying to look back. It's been 40 years, and which nation that is primarily Alkebu-Lan has even shown interest in building anything to address the deterioration of this earth and perhaps habitating elsewhere?
Problem with that is colonialism has stunted our growth, and we're just getting stable.
Didn't we all just watch Hidden Figures? Didn't we all just watch the Alkebu-Lan mathematicians that contributed to the necessary calculations to launch manned spaceflight? So these are Alkebu-Lan people that don't realize, or at least the history that they tell us about these women, that don't realize that their loyalty should be with Alkebu-Lan first. We were there, but were we credited?
No, and that's exactly what you were telling the children, that in these societies, it's about the individual, and the governments take the individual and assign them to the state. So no, they're not assigned to their units that they originate from.
So let's say that these women had a history that wasn't drenched in Jim Crow South, and they didn't identify as Black, Afro, or Negro people. Let's say they identified themselves as African people, and they demanded that their contributions to NASA were recorded as African contributions. Do you think that would have spawned a whole new generation of children of African descent to pursue higher levels of math and rocket propulsion if they knew that these women were doing it?
Absolutely.
But then how did they get written out of the history books?
Because they were just written off as work for hire, and it didn't have to be identified.
And that's why history is important, because that's the context by which we know Africa isn't behind in the space race, as Jermaine says. We helped contribute to the calculations necessary.
What should we be focusing on now?
We should be focusing on finding the African essence in everything that we do. And we need enough information historically to make sure that we're oriented to, whenever we put our hands on something to improve something, that we have the context that we are putting African hands on an African problem to improve the lives of African people primarily. And if other people benefit from that, so be it. But what we need to stop doing is putting our hands that don't see color on world issues that benefit a rainbow coalition of people, because colorism and racism don't exist, and everybody is human and should benefit. Therefore, the people that are in the most need of resources, of technology, of help, and the reason that they're in the need of those things is because they were purposefully deprived of those things. If we continue to not see the importance of history and the importance of assigning an actual cultural reference to everything that we do, then we're going to continue to be of a disservice to our people, while we benefit the very people that took away the services from those people to begin with. So we need enough history to know that every time we approach an issue, we're approaching it from the African worldview. That's how much history we need. And then to know all the specific details, then we need history departments dedicated to elucidating the fuller story and building out the stories for us, just like Malcolm X had, just like Martin Luther King had, just like Marcus Garvey had.
You know what we haven't done in a long time?
What?
Kujenga Taifa Leo.
Build nation today. Kujenga Taifa Leo. And I guess since we're recording, we might as well say, remember to tune into this podcast, kujenga.fm. Have no fear when that URL redirects you to shule.com, because they are the same entity. Kujenga is the podcasting arm of Shule. Shule is dedicated to the proper orientation of children of Alkebu-Lan descent, but we will also help to reorient adults of Alkebu-Lan descent in receiving our information from the narrative of Alkebu-Lan first. That is our purpose, to get children and adults the Alkebu-Lan narrative so that they can restructure their mind to proper Alkebu-Lan thinking. Sounds simple? Takes a long time to do. It takes a lot of correcting of misinformation. So follow us on Instagram. We are Shoolay Inc. That's SHOOLAYINC on Instagram. We are on Facebook. That's facebook.com Kujenga Podcast. And we have Kujenga Podcast for YouTube. And then we have...
We're going to have to get better at delivering this.
Yeah. So you want to record it again?
Go ahead, do it again.
So you can follow our conversation monthly at the website kujenga.fm.
That's KUJENGA.FM.
Do not be alarmed when that redirects you to shoolay.com because we are one and the same. Kujenga Podcast is the official podcast entity for Shoolay. So feel free to follow us on all of the social media platforms, whether you follow us at Shoolay platforms or follow us on Kujenga Podcast on YouTube. We are Kujenga Podcast on
Facebook.
iTunes. We are Kujenga Podcast on Google,
SoundCloud,
Libsyn. So we're on all those platforms with Kujenga.fm. And we also continue the conversation. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Kujenga Podcast.
Kujenga Podcast. What did I say?
Kujenga.fm.
Well, Kujenga.fm is going to bring you to the Kujenga Podcast.
If you put in Kujenga.fm on YouTube, it's going to bring you to the Kujenga Podcast?
No, if you put in Kujenga.fm, it's going to bring you to Kujenga.fm, which is all the YouTube uploads anyway. It's fine. It's all tied in, right? Mm-hmm. So
a lot of editing
after you listen to all the episodes, head on over to shoolay.com. And on shoolay.com is where you can follow our mission to educate people of Alkebu-Lan descent, primarily children, but we also do re-educating of adults with the African or Alkebu-Lan narrative. Our mission is to reach people of Alkebu-Lan descent from as young as possible, from reading age, so that's from grade 6 or age 12, from 12 to 80. We're helping to bring the Alkebu-Lan narrative, our information primarily first, and from our scholars, from our point of view. And it does make a difference to how we digest that information and how we act as a culture.
And if you have any questions or comments, you can also email us at info@kujenga.fm.
Wonderful. Ask Baba Shaba Kojo.
Absolutely. And if you want to have a quick Facebook Live response to any questions while you wait for new episodes to be updated, which are monthly at this point, but if you have a question, you can always head to shoolay.com to the Contact Us page and send us a message with the hashtag AskShabaKojo. That's ShabaKojo. Hashtag AskShabaKojo. Send me your question and I will make you a short Facebook Live or YouTube video response to answer that question. So from all of us here at Kujenga.fm and Kujenga Podcast, we'd like to say thank you for tuning in and have a great rest of your day or night, depending on what time you listen.